folks ask for this to be moved up a little bit because of just the ability to see people's heads. So, but if you're on the back row and you can't see a long way away, that's on you. All right. So this is our last night together, not forever, but talking about this topic, the Baptist conversation, and as what I want to say as we begin is I like to talk about this all the time. So if after our time together for the last 6 weeks, you have unresolved questions or even unresolved feelings about some of what I've talked about, let's have lunch. Stop by the office. What I would request is that you not catch me at 10:50 right before a service and grind your gears there, because then I won't be, I'd have to stay home to center myself so that I won't be, so I'll be ready to preach. But this has been fun for me to prepare, and it's a conversation that's necessary. I think, the one we're talking about tonight, I told Jennifer, I said, they might come after me tonight, so if I don't make it out, you'll know why. As we finish, we are talking about our last fragile freedom, which is religious freedom. Tonight, we are going to remember why Baptists once risked jail and death for religious freedom. We are going to name with honesty why Baptists today are sometimes not seen as those same kinds of freedom givers. And we're going to wrestle with the real danger that comes when Baptists become more prominent and powerful and comfortable. So, that's where we are. Throughout our study, freedom has been our key word. What are the other three? What are the other three freedoms we've talked about? Can you remember? Okay, so that's soul freedom, Bible freedom, and church freedom. But freedom has been the linchpin word. Okay, tonight we're going to talk about religious freedom, and here's the uncomfortable truth about it. Baptists were once the loudest voices for liberty as it relates to religious freedom, but today sometimes Baptist voices are muddled around this subject. We're going to talk about why. Many people today don't really experience that. Now, Buddy Sheridan, one of the Baptist historians about this, said, Baptists are not perceived as freedom lovers and freedom givers by many persons outside the Baptist community. So, this has not always been true, but is part of our story as well. Why do you think that perception exists?
I think it's because of the individualism of the different churches, in a sense, and not, I don't want to say, in a way, it's not a united group, like when you give the Methodist or the other different religions, they have those paths, and I think that's part of the perception.
Okay. So there's difference, okay, and there's not a unifying voice. Anybody else? Andy?
As far as religion goes, I'm aware of autonomy. They think it's the truth.
Right.
It goes back to the other stuff. We stop being free.
Right. So you brought up the idea of this sense of autonomy, and a lot of times, especially, some Baptists don't really comprehend this idea of local church autonomy, the subject that we were talking about last week. and especially people who didn't grow up Baptist, right, or it didn't get talked about, even if they did grow up Baptist. So this sense that there's not a good full understanding. Is it fair? Not fair? Complicated? As Bob Queequeg would say.
I think it's hard to generalize across the board
Yeah.
on that.
It is, right? Because there are so many pockets of discussion, even today.
Well, even today, when I'm speaking to someone who's unaware of sort of Baptist history, and I say I'm a Baptist, and I often say, but that's not Southern Baptist.
Mm-hmm.
And then I explain that there are other groupings under the heading.
Right.
That makes me more comfortable
Right.
in talking.
Sure. So even having to make the distinction of when we talk to friends in the community about the kinds of Baptists we are, and that's kind of where we're going to unpack tonight. So Baptists and the state. It's always had a tense relationship. Okay. And so we're going to talk a little bit about three biblical postures. So Romans 13. Somebody help me unpack Romans 13. What's that text? Will you open it up? You got Bibles in front of you. Somebody finds Romans 13 and see if you can't give me the verse I'm talking about, the idea I'm talking about. Respecting the governing authority. Because really there are three biblical postures when it comes to religious freedom. Somebody be working on Revelation 13 and Matthew 22.
So did you want the whole chapter read?
No, I'm sorry. It's the first verse, right?
First verse.
Yes, read it for us.
Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those authorities that exist have been instituted by God.
Okay. So who's writing this? Paul. Okay. And Paul is talking about living in Rome as a first century Christian, right? Were first century Christians uber accepted in Rome? No. They were uber persecuted, right? We talked about how they were hiding in houses, house church, you could imagine that there's this sense that would bubble up from a people who were running from the law, but were trying to have church together. That the preacher, the missionary, might have to say, "You guys can't just. You got to participate in the society. You can't just go rogue, because what would happen if they did? It would be worse, right? It was already bad." And he's arguing this sense that you've got to respect the governing authority, right? No anarchy here. All right, Revelation 13. I think.
First.
Yeah, we read
And
it.
I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his head the names of life.
So there's this image of power that is unwieldy, right? In Revelation 13. And it's, again, no scripture needs to be read out of context. Context matters, right? Who the audience was matters. because you've been in a family. Have you ever been invited to a family affair that you weren't the family, and they get to telling stories? You're like, man, I wonder who Aunt Bertie is, or I sure would have loved to meet her. You've got your own language, right? You can say a word that everybody who experienced it knows, right? And it brings up all these emotions and all this context that you aren't aware of. But, John here in Revelation 13 is painting this picture of a beast that is beyond conquerable, right? This warning against state power or this power becoming an idol that gets in the way. All right? And then Matthew 22. What does Jesus, this text, who tries to trap him? It's not just the first verse. No, try to find where the Pharisees come and what do they ask him? Do we need to pay taxes to Rome? I mean, you're talking about a Hebrew people who are living in a different town, right? One of the reasons why money changers existed was because most of the time you're walking around with dollar bills, Roman currency. But when you go to the temple, are they going to take Roman currency at the temple? No. And people were swapping, right? It's kind of like when I began to travel internationally with teenagers, one of the first pieces of advice I got was never exchange money at the airport. The worst exchange rate you're going to get. Think about it in the temple. Those folks set up shop. They said, hey, here's a business idea. We got people showing up with Roman coins. They need our currency. Let's set up shop and we can make a little money on the side. So Jesus is asked, do we pay taxes? What was his answer? That's right. They were trying to trap him. Either answer was perilous. And he wisely says, what is Caesar's, render unto Caesar's. What is God's, render unto God's. And I preach a mean sermon that I've yet to preach to you about the fact that you are God's coin. Each of us is God's coin. And our job is to turn our life over, right? To render unto God our life. So we've got these three Baptist, or these three places to stand. But Baptists have always insisted on two things at once. This idea of loyalty to Christ and a sense of freedom of conscience for all people. And I think one of the things that we run up against is that it's not just today. I'm not talking about the current political climate. I'm talking about the political climate for decades. Is the truth that the First Amendment's not as secure as we often assume, right? Even some Baptists who believe in the separation of church and state at their core, who believe in religious freedom, have spoken against it. Right? I'm jumping ahead. I won't jump ahead. So that's the crisis, right? Why would people who once depended on religious liberty now feel safe minimizing it, dismissing it? What's that mean? Country, you say country before Christ. What's that mean? Well, I mean, where do Christians sit now? In the day when Rome was the occupier, where did Christians sit? Were they in the seat of power? No, they were not. When America was founded, we left the seat of power, right? And historians, I'm terrible at history. I need help, but the Puritans came with this sense to found a space where folks could practice religion freely. That the Anglican Church could not tell you what you had to do. Right? They were fleeing it. They were running away from it.
But they then embraced practice religion the way we tell you, Puritan way. That's where the Baptists ran into them because they were Puritan.
Preach it. So, well, and so
Roger Williams left Massachusetts, and we could open up a colony there that was truly religiously free.
So you even and that's the distinction I want to make here. Even the folks who are fleeing the Anglican Church come to the New World, and they start going, all right, now we've got the power, and we're going to set the agenda. Right? Everybody else is in trouble. It's our religion. So now can you see why people who are Christian, are in a seat of power these days, right? And so it's faith. It feels safe to say other religions don't get. You can't really practice. You shouldn't be able to practice this. You shouldn't be able to practice that.
See that going on.
All right. You don't see that going on?
No.
Okay.
I don't see legally or.
Right.
I mean, I still think the Constitution is what the Constitution is. It doesn't really say, I don't think, separation of church and state. I think it says freedom of religion. But I don't think it separates necessarily. I think when it started, it was one of the things for the Puritans, the state separated over some issues like differences in faith.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one of the reasons we have states and not a union. We have states' rights.
Right.
Partly on religion from the beginning, I think.
Right.
So but my original statement was I don't see a lot of people. Not saying other people can't worship in the way they want to worship. Just don't mess with ours.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and I guess that's where I think that's maybe the rub, Tommy, is when folks say, freely practice but don't infringe, right? And I we're not going to. It's a distinction. I don't want to say it's a distinction without a difference because it is different, but at the same time, we've got this sense that there are spaces and places where folks who aren't Christian feel unsafe in the world, right? Everywhere. I'm not just talking about America. I'm talking about in the world. There are spaces and towns. Atlanta. Every town has spaces and places where people are afraid or feel a sense of impingement, right? And in their sense, they would say the same thing you just elicited as a Christian, which is, sure, practice yours, but don't stop me from practicing mine, right?
But I don't see where we infringe on people's practice of religion. Really, I just don't see where people are not safe
Right.
to do that. I mean, more Christians in the world probably than any other religion in the world.
All right, Matt, and then
Two things. One, just to clarify, political scientist.
sure.
First Amendment, free exercise, and freedom of establishment. So anyone can exercise and you cannot establish. Two different parts of the First Amendment. Second, I agree that legally it's not happening, but there are people who are practicing under the banner of Christianity or under their sect and being less than hospitable towards other groups, and thus those groups, while legally are not being persecuted, they definitely are practiced by certain people.
Okay. So again, we're parsing, and I think to Tommy's point, we probably can all agree that there aren't any illegalities necessarily happening, but there are people. Just because when you are, it's just like being in a room of South Carolina fans as a Clemson. I mean, anytime the dominant group is present and you are not the dominant group, you feel a little bit smaller, right? And so we've got this sense going on. Did you want to?
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not just that Christians are not being persecuted, it's people of other faith.
Yeah.
And the freedom is for all people, regardless of your religion.
Yeah.
That you have the freedom to practice.
Sure. Okay.
And I read just the other day about a couple of congressmen, I believe from Texas, who are obviously Republicans, who now want to pass a law basically kicking all Muslims out of the country. They don't fit with us.
Well, out of the
They
state,
fit our culture.
out of the state of Texas,
The country.
out of the country. Okay. I didn't hear the. Yeah. Okay. All right.
This is a clear violation of First Amendment.
Sure. Yes, Lauren.
Share a story that happened in this town last week to a Landers student whose brother-in-law is African American, sister is white. Went to a Baptist church in the city of Greenwood, walked in, he was there with his sister and parents visiting a church, Baptist church. And sister had a medical situation, text her African American husband who was at work. Hey, I need my medicine, can you bring it to me? Two white men met him at the door and said, I'm sorry, what are you doing here? He said, my wife's inside of the service and has a medical situation. Bring that. Well, we don't have any black people here. And sent him back out to the parking lot. So when we say things aren't being infringed upon and people's ability to feel safe to practice how they are, we need to take a good long look at our own privilege that we have and the comfort that we have, and think about how it is for people who are also our neighbors, that they are also getting it.
Yes, ma'am.
Because Baptists have the freedom to decide individually.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, our church, that would never happen in our church.
Well, I would hope not, right? I would hope not. And every church, like we said last week, especially every Baptist church is different. And we are talking about religious freedom, and we're talking about, this is a hard, really tough subject these days. I almost said there were only 3 fragile freedoms because I didn't really want to talk about this. But this is a really tough subject, and we're going to have a lot of strong feelings related to it. But here's the truth. The Baptist witness, the history of freedom was not a theoretical idea. It was lived in the life of people like Thomas Helwys, who told the king he had no authority over souls and died in prison for saying it. He lost his life, died in prison for standing up to the king because he spoke up. Roger Williams, John Clark, and Obadiah Holmes were all beaten, jailed, and exiled. Not because they broke a law, only because they were worshiping freely. Isaac Backus and John Leland influenced the adoption of the First Amendment, and they insisted on that liberty must be protected for everyone, not just Baptists. not just any specific religion group under Christianity. And the truth is, Baptists didn't ask for special treatment. They asked for equal freedom for everybody. So the foundations of religious freedom. The Baptist foundations for religious liberty come out of the nature of God. And there's this sense that, again, what we've already kind of talked about, especially early on, we talked about the truth that God alone is the Lord of our conscience. And each of us are responsible. I'm not responsible for you. You're not responsible for me. Each of us has responsibility, and God alone is judge. God alone is responsible for the conscience of Christians. So that's the first thing. The second is the nature of humanity. Sure, we are fallen, but guess what? Genesis 1 says, we are made in the image of God. Everybody. Everybody is made in the image of God. And so you've got this all-powerful God who is Lord alone of the conscience. We have the sense that every person bears God's image, and that faith is choice. Faith cannot be coerced. It cannot be made to happen. Now, you certainly can bring compliance out of anyone. Most folks. I mean, I lived with a son who took a lot to get compliance out of, but most folks will become compliant under certain pressures. But the truth is, faith is not something that can be made to happen in another's life. It cannot be coerced. And so forced faith in any situation, whether it's forced by whether I'm forcing George or whether the state is forcing anyone else, that kind of faith isn't faith. Right, Haley?
Question. So I feel like one of the most common arguments we hear from people about, why Christianity is a push compared to other religions and other religious freedom is because the Bible tells us to go and make disciples and witness, right? And tell people about God and bring people into our religion with us.
Right.
How would you describe to somebody who asks, what is the balance between witnessing and spreading our faith versus still letting people have autonomy to believe what they want?
Yeah, I think it's the most beautiful image is not one of mine, but it's one of Jesus's, and it's that sower, right? The seed sower. Beautiful, beautiful parable. And we are all called first to be Christ bearers, right? Salt and light. And the last thing Jesus said, my life verse is go, and as you are going, make disciples. And so, but I forget who was the Christian who said, I'm going to confess, I'm going to teach others about Christ, but if I have to, I'll use words. Who was that? I can't remember who that was. I don't know. I don't think it was Luther. I don't know if it was. It was St. Francis. Thank you. St. Francis. So part of me says, our witness needs to be words, but our witness needs to be action too, right? So for me, it's both and the other piece is the seeds that we sow. So I think part of our witness is showing up for people And when they think of me, I want them to think of a person who they feel like genuinely loves and cares for them, right? And who strives his best to follow some sort of I hate to use the word moral, but is someone of trustworthiness and kindness who show the fruit of the Spirit. Let's just say it that way, right? But then to make space for, to not say, well, you've yet to decide, and so you're not invited to the party, right? To continue to make space and say, where are you on it? To sow the seed and be patient. George?
I would often also make the analogy of setting the table for them, to feed them and invite them in an inviting way, to have that, and that's my open witness as well as my active witness. And if they don't sit at the table, it's not something that is against them. I keep that table setting for them.
Yeah.
At all times.
Yeah, and I like that image. It's a beautiful image. And it creates space, what I was talking about. It's not force feeding, right? You're not saying, you got to eat these peas, sucker. No, it's sit down at the table. And you're all, there's always going to be enough for you to come when you decide. And when, this topic is one that stretches us because, forced faith is not faith. It's a choice that each individual makes. And any entity that is putting pressure on someone to make that choice more quickly is doing a disservice, right? If I say to Charlie, look, I love you, but, I'm only going to pay your student loans if you go to church. Is that faithfulness? It's leverage, isn't it? And religious freedom, all we've been talking about is faithfulness. But religious freedom also protects belief and unbelief. That's one of the rubs. That's one of those things that me and Jesus are going to have a long chat over, right? But if we can't make space for unbelief, it's being coerced. It's being coercive and forceful. Now, do we need to give up our willingness to tell others about Jesus? No. I'm not saying do not share the gospel directly to Haley's question. But what I am saying is we make space for unbelief. And that's the only way that religious freedom can stay alive. So, which of these foundations feel most threatened? This nature of God, the nature of humanity, every person bears the image, and faith can't be coerced. They are, right? At times they all are being pushed and pulled on, right? What religious freedom really means is where we're going here. And I'm gonna bring up a word that Chuck and I talked about over lunch last week. Toleration versus liberty. Okay? Toleration says we're going to make space for you for now. In our understanding tonight, liberty says you have full autonomy. You have the right to exist. You have the right to every choice you would ever make. Some of those might end you up in jail or with some consequences, but you have the liberty, you have the right to exist. And this is one idea. So, who does this freedom, this liberty exist for? Both for all religions, freedom from or for, and then also freedom from. That's the idea of making space for unbelief, right? So if this idea of toleration versus liberty exists, freedom of religion would say we go all the way to liberty, right? For whom? All religions, and from it. That if there are people who say, I don't need any of it, they have the liberty and the right to stand there, right? And a strong Baptist conviction is that if my faith requires freedom to be authentic, then your faith or non-faith deserves the same. Yes, George?
And when I see this,
Mm-hmm.
I look at it, and God gave that.
Okay.
I mean, because He gave us the option to choose.
Yep.
And I look at it from my standpoint, who am I to then challenge or force someone to do something that God has given him free will? That doesn't mean that I will not speak to him and try to persuade him.
To set a place at the table.
At the end, it is his choice.
Right.
And it is he or she that will have to go before the board to do that. And I may be wrong. I hope I'm not. But I mean, I look at that from that standpoint, and I don't think I'm
right.
But that choice has to be given to those individuals.
Yep.
And I don't think we as humans have that right to force that.
Okay, it's a good word. Chuck, you want to say, you had your hand up.
I just want to comment that in freedom from religion, that everyone has that freedom to be unreligious.
Mm-hmm.
Non-religious.
Right.
And being unreligious should not negatively impact your civil rights, your standing in the community.
Yep. Yep. So you got this sense that a free church in a free state. This is the idea that we're wrestling with, right? That Baptist contribution is freedom, a free church in a free state. That there's not hostility between the two, but there's healthy separation of powers, to steal a phrase, healthy distance. So I'm going to name some threats that we don't often want to. The first is an assumption that freedom is safe. Chief Justice Rehnquist said this in 1990. The wall of separation between church and state is a metaphor based on bad history, a metaphor that has proved useless as a guide to judging. It should be frankly and explicitly abandoned. And then, also from W.A. Criswell, I believe this notion of the separation of church and state was the figment of some infidel's imagination. So you've got the sense that we assume in life or in America that freedom is something that is, the freedom of religion is a safe thing. And yet we've got leaders of churches and the highest court saying opposite at times. And so again, this is one of those topics that's raging right now, and I know there are probably folks in the room who are like, this preacher, I swear, this preacher. But we can't assume that freedom is something that everyone will allow. Right? We cannot. And that is one of the things we need to name. All right, the second, another hard truth that we need to name is this sense that this idea of civil religion. And this is when citizenship and discipleship kind of blur. I use the word American Christianity. And what I mean by that is it's lots of things. But one of the things that I equate it to, and it's not just American, it's probably modern Christianity, is this sense that we compartmentalize life so much. And it's not just in America, it's all over the world. Not maybe in third world countries, because it's, I just think about how neat and tidy grocery shopping is for my wife and my family, right? Like, to get a chicken breast right now, I can get a really clean chicken breast that's already frozen for me in an individual packet if I'm willing to pay that kind of price for a chicken breast, right? We don't understand the mess of life as much today as some of our ancestors did. The work it took to prepare a place at the table. You know, I've never had to defeather a chicken before, wringing its neck and getting it prepared. You know what I'm saying? Right, Tara? We don't want to think about that, right? But that living in the bubble that we live in, this is just one example that I like to use. Living in the bubble that we live in, right? Drive-through coffee, Uber Eats, whatever it is. We forget that Jesus sweat. We get farther away from incarnation. We get farther away from the fleshiness of Christ when we compartmentalize life. And so anytime citizenship or civilization come forward, we lose ground on our understanding of who Christ is, from where I stand, right? And so we got to constantly work harder to catch up with who that Nazarene really was, right? What his life looked like, and what he was teaching and professing. And then when any national symbol, as important as they are, I'm not demoralizing national symbols, okay? Hear me say that. But when they replace our gospel commitments as Christians, we've got a problem. Because what is the confession of the Christian? Jesus is Lord. There's nothing else. Literally. There's nothing else. The mode of baptism does not matter. How many times you take communion does not matter. Jesus is Lord is the confession of the Christian. And so anything else that takes away from that confession could get in the way. So it's just another thing to open our eyes to and to look at, a threat. I'm not saying it's rampant. Some argue it is. I'm just saying we need to name it. Success and comfort is a third threat. And I started here with, this is where I kind of started with the in crowd, the powerful. Again, resting on your laurels, whatever it is, whatever you're successful at, when you stop striving, usually all right, you get a D-Min, you get a PhD, you're like, I learned it all. No, we have to constantly be learning, right? We're lifetime learners. So there is no accomplishment that we can attain to say, all right, I'm done. So when Baptists are no longer persecuted, which there aren't a ton of Baptists in America right now that are being persecuted. There just aren't. There are Christians in the world who are being persecuted. Not anywhere close to us, but there are. And in many communities, we're the establishment. Right? We're in charge in a lot of senses. And so when those come, they are just things to name, right? Freedom is easiest to defend when you're powerless, and easiest to forget when you're not. Freedom when you're on the bottom rung, you're like, what is it was William Wallace, right? What was that movie? Was it Braveheart? Braveheart, right? What did he scream in the blue paint? Freedom! All right. They were a persecuted people. They were trying to topple the power. What do you think Jesus was doing? Jesus was not at the top of the pyramid. Jesus was toppling the power. It's why Rome crucified him. When I had a friend, we talked about, I forgot to start looking. Had a friend talking about feeding the 5,000, feeding the 4,000. He said, I wonder if word got around that after that miracle, oh no, now he's got an army. I don't know. I've never heard that perspective. I was like, I never heard that before. Where'd you read that? Because he's not smart enough to come up with stuff like that on his own. Jesus was toppling the power. And so anytime success and comfort come, freedom is easy to forget. Participation, the way we've participated. I've got 2 vignettes I want to read to you. These are vignettes, one from 1694 and another from 300 years later. The year of 1694, William Smith, a Baptist preacher, has just been thrown in jail. He and his little band that they call a church have been warned repeatedly to stop their illegal activities. These activities consisted of meeting together in Smith's home for worship and studying the scriptures. Only a minister properly licensed by the government, by the church, could conduct such services in the colony. The local authorities ran out of patience with these radicals. And then in 1994, the year's 1994, Dr. Bill Smith, pastor of First Baptist Church, has just been elected to the local school board. Dr. Smith and his congregation have been active in a variety of community issues. Only last Sunday, First Baptist hosted the mayor's annual prayer breakfast, and practically all the local politicians made sure they put in an appearance. These are 2 different images, right, of Baptists and their space in the civil society, in the governmental hierarchy, for lack of a better phrase. And I'm standing in a glass house, and I'm not going to throw a stone because some of you may know I was an elected official in Rome. I ran for school board and got elected twice. And so, and I struggled with that, but one of the things I never did was bring it to church. You bring your whole self to church, so one could argue, yeah, you did. You did it all the time. But that's, that's tough, right? So which group would worry more about religious freedom from these 2 stories? The first one, right? They were the ones being thrown in jail, who might find separation of church and state, that idea, inconvenient. Which story? The second, right? So the question that we need to grapple with is, Has the foundation of liberty, this free exercise of religion, right? Has it changed or have we? Right? Has it changed or have we? So Baptists are better at evaluating others than evaluating ourselves, I promise. But the mirror we need, these are some things that we, that I want us to wrestle with. And we don't have to answer them tonight. But I want us to think about where our congregation might appear not to be freedom-giving people. And where do we clearly live as freedom lovers? Where are we good? So these are our limiting factors, and these are the things that we're a pig wallowing in slop over, right? And then are we willing to defend freedoms for groups that we might even disagree with? And, we're going to answer those questions for ourselves, but also as a congregation, right? And the truth of the matter is, the fourth fragile freedom is making space for groups, even that we would disagree with. As hard as that is to do, it's creating space for those folks. Again, this freedom of religion is not something that's just passed down. It's like anything else that's not practiced, whether it's a free throw, and I would argue Brad Brownell needs to get the Clemson players on the free throw line more. Anything you don't practice, you fall away from. And so I feel like our calling is something that we must practice, right? Or it will quietly disappear. Anything that we don't hold as a value disappears. So, questions, comments, Matt?
Let me make two comments. One, you did a PhD program thinking you know everything, you was a bad PhD. Leave knowing you know nothing. So that's one. But two, I want to share a story that kind of ties into this. Last Thursday, Chief Justice of the South Carolina Supreme Court, John Kittredge, was at Lander and gave a talk to our Free Law Society and to our students. Very good talk. And in that, he made a comment. He swore an oath on the Bible that he's protecting the Constitution. He had to make many decisions where, as a Christian, he did not like the decisions, but he was making the right decision by the law. So I think there's an example of whether to Caesar or the Caesar God or true freedom, but realizing that you have to treat everyone equally. And if we want to witness to them, we have to show those fruits and not persecute them or treat them as people.
Right. Yeah.
And I think right now the loudest voices, maybe while we have a misperception here, is that we're not this way, but there are many Christian nationalists who are the loudest voices who are practicing treating others as others and looking down and treating them differently. Even those of us who are more accepting look badly that aren't practicing.
Yeah. It's a daily walk and a choice, and often gives, like you said, Kittredge vocalized, it leaves a knot in your stomach, right? Because we know our values as Christians, we do, and we have to hold them in tension with seeing every person as created in God's image. That's a difficult place to stand. Yes, Betty Rose.
Idea of protecting the rights of those to be non-believers. That's a fluid group.
Yeah.
You can't just say they're all non. It was Barabbas who was taken off the cross to make who is best known for saying, "Help me in my
unbelief." Mm-hmm.
So he was struggling. There are a lot of people say black and white, but you can get in a big fight about were the founding fathers Christians. And yes, they were. And since they were Christians, the Constitution should be viewed as a Christian document. And we are only patriotic if we believe it. Very We don't. When do they put under God in it? Somebody Google it.
Yeah. Sure. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, we've already, I think you're right. And again, these are issues that, because we're faithful people and because we love our God, some of these conversations have made us shift in our seat or made us frustrated. And the beauty of that is we're right where Baptists should be, which is struggling over this idea of religious freedom and what it looks like. And so I just want to continue to point to this because freedom in any sense is not something that's easily passed down. It's something that must be practiced, both practiced and protected as we move forward in our lives. So I appreciate you all have hung with me this entire time. I appreciate your being here and your questions. And again, I want to reiterate it for anybody who wasn't here when I said it earlier. If anything has been left unsaid by you, or if there's something you still want to quabble with me over and we want to have another discussion, let's talk about it. Because again, this is stuff that lights me up. It's stuff I feel strongly about and passionate about, and would love to have conversation with anybody about it. So thank you all for sticking with me and for joining the conversation going forward. I want to have a prayer and then we will dismiss. Lord, you are God. You are supreme. And we bow before you and we seek to know you more each day. You call us each to something important, Lord. You've gifted us and called us. And as we lean into more of who you are, we learn more both about you, but also about ourselves. Keep teaching us, Lord. Lord, we're grateful for the chance to discuss and debate and decide, to discern. And most of all, as we've wrestled and as we've discussed, we seek your face, Lord. We seek your face in all that we say and do. And we strive to live as George so beautifully described, offering space at a table, at our table, a place of friendship, a place of attempted understanding, seeing everyone we meet not as threat or not as someone that we've got to try to convince of something, but someone who is a fellow traveler, someone that we have things to teach, but also someone from whom we might be able to learn. Lord, teach us, continue to teach us how to be more fit disciples who confess first that Christ is Lord and who do our level best to follow Christ, yes, even to a cross. We pray all these things in the name of Christ, who is our rock and our Redeemer. Amen.